being here tonight. I want to thank everyone who helped pull tonight's forum together. State Senator Adriano, Espaillat, Councilmember Ydanis Rodriguez, Councilmember Robert Jackson, Assemblymember Gabriela, Rosa, the Barack Obama Democratic Club and its leader Marlene, the Northern Manhattan Democrats for Change, and of course, the Malcolm and Betty Shabazz Memorial and Center and the Shabazz Sisters who are here with us tonight. So thank you all for giving us this opportunity. And also State Senator Ben Perkins. You know, it's great to be here tonight and have an opportunity to talk about the issues that are facing Northern Manhattan. Because a lot of the issues that are facing Northern Manhattan are the issues that are facing neighborhoods all throughout the city. It's also great for me to be here tonight to talk about issues in Northern Manhattan because Inwood is a neighborhood I have a real connection to. My mother grew up in Inwood at Isham Street. My parents were married at Good Shepherd. My sister was baptized there, and my grandfather, who was a battalion chief in the New York Fire Department, was buried from Good Shepherd. And I spent a lot of my childhood in Inwood and have wonderful memories of my time there and my time at Good Shepherd. And Northern Manhattan, Inwood, and Washington Heights, they are two of the neighborhoods and a part of our city that has made our city great. They're the neighborhoods where people like my four grandparents, immigrants, came because they knew there was potential here. Potential to have a better life for your family than what you had before. Why was there that potential? Because there was affordable housing. And that's something we have to fight hard to preserve in this neighborhood, expand in this neighborhood, and expand across the city. You know, when my grandparents came here, their key to getting into the middle class was just hard work. Today, it's hard work and education. And that's another issue we have to focus on, and Robert knows this as well as anybody. With a laser-like attention. We can make New York City's public schools even better. Why do I know that? Because we've already come together and made important change that we can build on. Last year, we didn't just say we wanted to expand early childhood education. We did it, Robert and I, by working in Albany and getting the state legislature to make kindergarten mandatory, a change we're going to see real effect, and when that goes into effect next year. What else do we know when we're standing here in this great part of Manhattan? That although we have gotten all of the jobs we lost in the recession back, we still have 9.4% unemployment, and we still have neighborhoods that had significantly high unemployment before the recession. So the commitment of the next mayor and everyone who's elected into office come 2014 has to be to take unemployment down in a real way, particularly in communities that were suffering significant unemployment before. And what does that mean? It means having a diverse and comprehensive economic development program that teaches people skills, takes the skills they have and gives them opportunities and helps put people to work. I really believe if you look around this city and you look around these neighborhoods, we have all the resources we need if we all come together to make our schools better, to expand affordable housing, to improve affordable housing, and to put the programs we need in place to grow jobs and reduce unemployment. And I look forward to discussing these and other issues with you tonight as I get here, from what I've heard, incredibly easy questions from the Senate. So that'll be fun, and then we'll take the hard questions from the floor. But thank you.
Let me start with the easy questions.
I didn't hear them at all. Not at all.
Some of the things that have been said about you is that you might continue Bloomberg's policies because you're a close ally. And can you tell us how are you going to be different from Michael Bloomberg? And can you mention specific policies that you might not continue from his administration?
Well, first I'll be different because I'm way cuter and it'll be just a lot more fun when I'm there. So let me start with that important point. You know, let me just back up a little bit on that question. Because I think, and it's curious to me at times, because a lot has been made about the fact that the city council under my leadership has worked well when we could with Mayor Bloomberg. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the times we have been able to come together. I'm proud of the fact that when we came together, we put $3 billion in a trust fund. That's money that's helped us prevent worse cuts during the recession. And that we prepaid $8 billion worth of bills so our finances would be stronger. I'm also proud of the fact that working with Mayor Bloomberg and the council, we passed the Safe Housing Act into law. a program that's taken 1,000 of the worst and most dilapidated buildings in this city and turned them around into quality housing. And I'm also proud that we've been able to put the proactive prevention unit in HPD, a unit that's working with us now in the Vantage portfolio in northern Manhattan to hold that slumlord accountable for what he's done and not let him walk away from those buildings. Now that's what you can do when you work collaboratively. And I would keep proactive prevention. I would build on it. I would build on the success of the safe housing law. But the areas where the mayor and I have disagreed, we've done it agreeably, and I would make changes in those areas where we disagree, and let me name a few. Right now, the mayor and the city council are in court over a very, in my opinion, significant issue of homeless policy. I think you'll remember when Giuliani was mayor, he changed the policy for homeless families. So when you went to the homeless shelters, you had to prove you were homeless. You had to prove that you didn't have any other option. Well, who's showing up at the homeless shelters for fun? You know what I mean? Why would you go there if you had somewhere else to sleep? And this incredibly punitive, cruel process forced people to get rejected, even though the majority of them, when they reapplied, came back in. Mayor Bloomberg is trying to extend that policy to homeless singles, a population that we know has a higher rate of mental health challenges and addiction challenges, a population where it will be even more devastating. We told the mayor we disagreed. We tried to negotiate and get him to change his mind. He wouldn't, and we are in court right now with the Legal Aid Society and Coalition for the Homeless, and I believe we will win and prevent that policy from being implemented. Now, we passed in the city council a prevailing wage bill and a living wage bill that raises standards for building service workers and other workers whose salaries come from city contracts. Those are laws I would immediately implement if I was mayor, and I would drop the city's lawsuit against both of them. We are with RWDSU and 32BJ in court right now fighting on those pieces of legislation. That fight needs to stop. They need to be implemented, and we also need to find ways to expand what our Economic Development Corporation does, all of its investment, to incentivize those investments, to include in them the requirement of a living wage. So those are some of the examples, and there are others, but look, I believe you can disagree agreeably, and then move on and find agreement in other places. But that doesn't mean I'm ever going to change what I believe. Let me raise another point. You know, in the city budget that I've led the city council's negotiations for 7 years, every year the mayor has tried to close firehouses. It hasn't happened under my leadership, and it wouldn't happen if I was mayor of the city of New York. 2 years ago, the mayor proposed laying off 4,100 school teachers. We said no in the city council. We didn't just say no, we prevented it. We worked with the UFT. We found $80 million worth of concessions that they could give, $80 million that changed the negotiations and saved those jobs. So that'll give you some sense of where we disagree and how things might be different.
Going to affordable housing, a lot of our neighborhoods either don't have the space to build new housing, or the housing have been built, but the community hasn't been included in, as a consequence, they've been pushed out of their neighborhoods, and they're moving to, you know, poorer neighborhoods, but then, you know, that keeps on happening, and there's gonna be a point where there's not gonna be any more space or affordable. What do you consider affordable in the city, being that we have so many communities with different makeups, exactly?
You know, I think affordability is a neighborhood-by-neighborhood discussion and a neighborhood-by-neighborhood determination. You know, one of the things in land use and in affordable housing, an incredibly critical entity is our community boards. And one of the things I look for when I'm working on affordable housing and development issue is input from the community board about what they are seeing as affordable for their neighborhood. And what you need to do for affordability is going to be different in different neighborhoods based on the economic makeup, different based on what housing housing has already been built in that neighborhood with what kind of subsidies that target what type of affordability for those units. Also, it's going to be different based on what the level of gentrification pressures are at that moment in time. So I think that's a discussion that has to happen in every single development, with the community board at the table, with the community's voice at the table, so we are putting together diverse economic developments that meet the diverse needs of neighborhoods. But let me mention something in that context. We need to develop more affordable housing, but we can't lose any more affordable housing. And what does that mean? It means we cannot let the concept be that affordable housing is substandard housing. And that it's okay if you've let your buildings deteriorate as long as you don't charge a lot of rent. It's not okay. And we have to set the goal of getting every building in the city of New York up to the standard of the law. That's what the safe housing law was about. Targeting every year the 200 worst buildings and bringing them back up to code and livability. That's what the proactive prevention unit is about. Bringing bad apartments back up to livability. That's what a law we passed called underlying conditions does. Used to be that when an inspector came to your house, if there was a hole in the ceiling, they cited the ceiling. But they didn't figure out if that hole was caused by a problem with the roof or by leaky pipes, which would mean if you had a bad landlord, the inspector would be back and back and back. Now, because of the law we passed and the mayor signed, when you have complaints that are cited more than 3 times, the HPD inspector is then required to identify the underlying condition that's causing the hole in the ceiling. Cite the landlord to fix that, and if they don't fix it in a timely manner, HPD is empowered to go into that building, that apartment, fix it, and then sue the landlord to get the money back. It's what we did in the 200 worst buildings. We're taking it citywide. We've seen great collection rates from the money in court. I think that's going to help us really improve housing. But what else do we need to do to get affordability back so we can have a more robust conversation and get more affordable housing? We need to repeal the Erstad law. It is ridiculous that Albany makes a decision about our resources. Because of the weakening of rent laws in Albany and historically once in the city council, we've lost hundreds of thousands of affordable units that we're not going to get back if things stay as they are. We need more. We need to strengthen rent protection to not lose any more, and we need to raise the quality of housing. And the Vantage portfolio is a really important thing to think about. Because we've seen housing developers, particularly in northern Manhattan and the Bronx, buy up buildings before the recession, during the economic boom. They bought buildings up with the hope of flipping them. They never put any money into them. They didn't really care about being landlords. They just wanted to make money. And then when the market fell out, they largely walked away from them. And a lot of them are trying to sell them. They're trying to sell them to other unscrupulous landlords who won't fix them up. That's why we in the council have put together a team of pro bono architects and builders and engineers who will go into buildings and do a study for us of what's really needed. So there was a group of buildings in the Bronx, terrible quality. Someone came to us in the council and said, good news, I'm going to buy the buildings, I'm going to put $8 million into them. I said, I don't care about your $8 million. I've got this report that says the building needs over $20 million. So unless you're going to put $20 million into it, you buy this building, you buy a whole lot of hurt from the city of New York and its Department of Housing. That man didn't buy the building. Another man has, and the last time I visited that building, they had new windows and new bathtubs because we held the bank and the purchasers accountable, and we need to do that in every neighborhood and in every building. And the banks can't be let off the hook on it.
Madam Speaker, the public advocate has said that it is undemocratic the fact that you haven't put to a vote the paid sick days bill, knowing, in fact, that it's going to pass. There are enough co-sponsors of the bill. Are you concerned of upsetting the business community
You know, my concern about the paid sick leave bill, and we were scheduled to have another hearing on it at the request of the sponsor, Gail Brewer, in November. She understandably asked that we move that after Hurricane Sandy, and we are in the process now at her request of rescheduling the hearing on that, and we may in fact even have a date already. But we did have one, but understandably rescheduled it. My concern about paid sick leave is not upsetting the business community. It's about the timing of it. Look, I think the goal of paid sick leaves is a laudable goal. But if we implement it right now, in the economic state we're in, with small businesses struggling as much as they are struggling, I think we'll get paid sick leave and we'll lose small businesses. And that's why at this time, it's not a measure that I can support, but I am having to move forward with the process and have the next hearing at the request of the sponsor of the bill, Councilmember Brewer.
But why do you think you need more hearings, knowing that 37 council members are ready to support it?
There's a new version of the bill. And because there's a new version of the bill, as amended by the sponsor, which is significantly changed, we almost always, when there's big changes in a bill, have a second hearing. And that's what the sponsor of the bill requested. And as Speaker, you want to try to be responsive to the request of the sponsor. And with all due respect to the public advocate, that was the request of the sponsor to my office. And we've immediately accommodated both her request for it, her request to postpone it, and her request to reschedule.
Do you regret facilitating Mayor Bloomberg getting the third term in office?
You know, I don't. I think that was a decision that was right for the time. It gave voters the opportunity to make a choice. The voters sent some elected officials back, like me and Robert Jackson. They didn't send every elected official back, like other council members and other elected officials. It was a time when we were facing the most unprecedented economic crisis we had seen since the Great Depression in this city, and I think it was appropriate to give New Yorkers a choice, and that's what we did.
So following that standard, do you think that Mayor Giuliani should have stayed as the mayor of the city after 9/11?
It was a totally different kind of a thing, because what Mayor Giuliani wanted to do, if you remember, was not stand for election. He wanted, by I guess executive order or fiat or whatever, to be bestowed more time as mayor. What we did was cause an election where everybody had to stand up before the voters and defend what all of the decisions they made on term limits and everything else. Mayor Giuliani just wanted more time given to him without the voters deciding whether or not they agreed with that. So I think it was a very different proposal altogether.
I want to make sure I read one of the audience member questions before we finish. The city, before I pass the microphone to my colleagues, the City University of New York is the largest public urban university in the city. What would you do differently to support CUNY students?
First of all, I think we don't promote, tout, applaud CUNY enough. It is an amazing institution that we are so lucky to have, and for us in the council, it's been an outstanding partner with different projects we've done. At Hunter and other parts of CUNY, we put a program in place in partnership with the Health and Hospitals Corporation, which has helped reduce the nursing shortage in the city of New York. What we did was borrow, if you will, senior nurses from our hospitals, make them visiting faculty at CUNY. 1 year, a number of years ago, we turned away 375 qualified nursing students. Not because they didn't have the grades, not because they didn't have the commitment, but because we didn't have enough nursing professors. This program we funded in the council, which when it's all said and done, will have helped train about 500 additional nurses, was something we couldn't have done unless CUNY agreed with us. They would put this special program in place where you borrow the nurses, they're visiting professors for a couple of years, and then they go back to being nurses on the floor of our public hospitals. We're also working right now with CUNY and the community colleges and an entity called the General Assembly. It's kind of a tech business umbrella group. And they're guiding, at the council's request, some of CUNY's community colleges in developing kind of tech job training programs, if you will. Because one of the things you hear from the high-tech companies across the city is they have job vacancies in a lot of places. And in this economy, the last thing we want is anybody to have a job vacancy, but not everybody has the skills tech companies need. And this program we're doing with General Assembly and the community colleges is really terrific in making sure we get New Yorkers into those jobs. So those are some of the kind of programs I would want to expand at CUNY. Also, we in the council have been probably one of the most important governmental bodies that has stood up for CUNY funding. Both expense funding by restoring cuts that the mayor has made, but also capital funding. For a number of years in a row, probably too many to count, the city of New York has left tens of millions of capital dollars for CUNY on the table in Albany. By no fault of Albany's, because we didn't put up the city match. Unless we put up the match, we don't get it. In my State of the City last year, I challenged all of us to stop that, to put up, I believe it's $71 million in city capital funds to get the match from Albany. We got that, we did that, we've gotten the match, and we're already, with a particular focus on the community colleges, putting this money, capital money, in place to fix CUNY up. I would find, as much as we have resources, ways to invest in CUNY, but also use CUNY because it's a really nimble institution to help us with creative job skills programs like tech, like the nurses, that can help us deal with job shortages and put people to work quickly.
We have many members in the audience who are part of the community board, the local community board. And something that residents have over and over said to me is that they feel that the community board, unfortunately, winds up being a toothless organization because of diminished funding, no voting power, things like that. How would you actually strengthen the community board so that they can truly do the work of the community they serve?
You know, one of the things that I think is really unfortunate, and I just don't think it, you can see it through the actions of all of us in the council, is that community boards kind of exist on a regular, even more frequently than yearly basis, under the threat of budget cuts. Now you can say across the board cuts make sense, except if you look at the size of a community or a budget, which is so small, making even a 4% cut, which might be able to be absorbed in a bigger budget, can really be devastating, particularly if it's this 6th or 7th time that's happened. And that's one of the reasons we in the council have been very proud year after year to stand up and protect the community board's funding. Because a lot of them, as folks in this room know, exist on 1 or 2 or 1.5 staff and a lot of interns. So we need to kind of stabilize that funding. It's not an amount when you add it up that really ever helps with budget deficits anyway, because it's so small in the scheme of the entire budget, but really destabilizing to community. 2, I feel from my perspective in the city council, the voice of community boards, and I was a community board member in Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen, are incredibly important. Community board resolutions are at the table with us when we are negotiating particularly land use items. Now that doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but those resolutions, often those community board members, we just finished a negotiation around an issue with Community Board 7. Community Board 7 voice, individuals were in the room at City Hall. A question that gets asked all the time at our Democratic caucus, all the time by me, where is the community board on this deal? Are they in agreement? How many clauses were there in their resolution and how many of their points were met? You can't always get to exactly where people want, but I really have to say in the council, and I'm going to carry that into the mayor's office, those resolutions, particularly around land use, are incredibly helpful guiding forces. And also, often, community board land use members are as good as any lawyers you have at city planning or at the city council. They know their stuff because they've learned it every day in their neighborhood.
And in keeping with that, community benefit agreements with developers coming into neighborhoods or institutions, how would you actually find a way to make sure that we hold the developers responsible?
You know, that's a really important question. And there's challenging legal issues we have to figure out relevant to that, right? Because the charter is very specific, and the community board members here know this, that when you're doing land use votes, you can only vote on the land use items. You can't consider things beyond that. And in fact, I think the charter is too restrictive intrusive in some places, which is why when the last Charter Revision Commission came around, in the testimony I delivered and Gabriela did for the council, we made suggestions of how you could even be broader. But that said, it didn't change, right? So the charter is very specific. So a lot of the other issues that get raised by community boards have to be dealt with in community dentistry, which cannot be voted on by the city council. RJ will tell you, and Bill will tell you, remembers from his days in the council, we can't even really mention them. The lawyers urge us not to mention them when we vote because it can create an odd kind of cast a pale over the debate. So how do you then find a way to hold people accountable to something that wasn't voted on? It's a question we've been discussing in my staff with city council. I honestly don't know all the legal answers to that, but it is something we have to figure out and find a legal way we can do that. And we have folks researching that to try to help us come up with options that we could then take out and talk to people in communities about.
Al Sharpton said that he would support the candidate with the strongest chances of beating Joe Lhota. I'm wondering, what do you think makes that person, and what do you think of Joe?
Red hair makes that person. I hear that Joe Lhota is terrified of red hair. Just makes him crazy, he can't be in the room with somebody with red hair. Particularly if it's not natural. Look, I think we want to bring a Democrat back to City Hall. And that means we have to have somebody who is really the best candidate up against the Republican come November. What does that mean? It means somebody who's going to work hard as they possibly can, harder than anybody else. One thing I can tell you is I am a hard worker. Two, it means somebody who has a real record of results. Not just saying what they don't like, but finding ways to stop, prevent, and change what they don't like and think is wrong. But also somebody who's able to articulate a vision and implement the components of that vision to actually make people's lives better. Somebody who can work with all the different stakeholders in New York City to move things forward. And I think if you look at my time on the city council, particularly as speaker, I have that exact kind of a record. Whether it was stopping teacher layoffs, whether it was last year coming to an agreement with the Bloomberg administration and the unions to prevent the layoffs of hundreds of support staff in the public schools, whether it's keeping firehouses open, whether it's passing more pro-tenant laws, including a law that for the first time ever gives tenants the right to take their landlord to court if their landlord is harassing them. Whether it's working and creating a network of incubators across the city to give people in food and technology and fashion and business places they can go to start their company. Whether it's creating thousands of new manufacturing jobs at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and on from that, a list of real accomplishments that have made people's lives better. That's what we're going to need in the person who's going to beat the Republican. A real record of delivering, a real record of showing you can get things done. And I think, with all due respect to the other Democrats, for whom I have a lot of respect, I just don't think any of their records can stand up to mine.
As our time narrows,
absolutely, it needs to be changed. Let me tell you right now. It should have council advice and consent. We should pass the real rent reform bill that Tom Quinn used to have. I don't know who the sponsor is, because it is a kangaroo court, and those days need to end. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. That said, two quick questions for you. Nearly 3/4 of the businesses in Washington Heights and England employ less than 5 people. You have chosen not to bring to bear a couple of pieces of legislation that we've already discussed. What are 3 things you specifically would do to strengthen and or improve these businesses?
Small businesses? First of all, the city needs to change how we interact with small businesses. We need to stop using fees and fines, particularly restaurant fees and fines associated with letter grades, as a way to balance the budget. It's unfair, and it creates just a massive amount of stress and an unnecessary unknown for businesses that makes it really hard for them to budget, to balance, and maybe hire that 6th person, because they don't know how big or how walloped they're going to get by fines every year. 2, we need to embrace the same service outlook businesses, small businesses need to have. That's why we put in place something called the New Business Acceleration Team, NBAC. And the mayor's office did this at the council's request. It started by targeting small restaurants. And its first pilot phase, we helped 300 small restaurants open more quickly. We reduced the startup time for small businesses by 3 months. We now need to take NBAC and scale it citywide, not just for restaurants, but for every industry. And where I'd really like to get eventually is something I would call NYC Business Link, where every small business in this neighborhood or medium-sized business had a person in city government who was their person. So when you're confused about how the Department of Health regulation and the Department of Consumer Affairs regulation seems to contradict each other, you don't have to take your precious time as a small business owner and call both. You just call your NYC Business Link person, they figure it out for you, they get back to you. With NYC Business Link, when we eventually would get it fully to scale, what I want to have is that link for you be calling you to tell you, you know what, there's a new loan program. You know what, there's a new tax credit program. You know what, your license is going to expire in 2 months, you better start the paperwork. Because right now, we make business owners waste critical time, which is money, making their way through a bureaucratic morass that is not there to serve them. We need to change that. And I think those are some ways we could help businesses, and also hear from businesses other ideas. One of the other things we did working with a lot of the chambers in the city was put a new loan program out there. Chuck Schumer had started something called Second Look Credit for Success, where he got the banks upstate to put a part of their loan money aside. So basically, when they rejected a small business's loan, they take a second look in that pot of money. It was basically for what they would say riskier loans, and maybe make loans. We didn't have Second Look Credit for Success in the city until we called for it in the city council. We now have Credit for Success, Second Look in the 5 boroughs, and it has expanded the amount of loans that small businesses are able to get, which has been very helpful during these tough economic times.
Speaker Quinn, just to change gears here, last question. Latino students are projected to comprise over 50% of the education system in New York City in the next decade. Why would an immigrant family, given the struggles that they have to...
I'm sorry?
Why would an immigrant family look to you as their candidate, given the challenges that they have to have a sustainable bilingual education for their children?
Well, I would hope that an immigrant family would look to me as it relates to education, because if you look at the record of what we've done in the city council, one of the first, if not the first things I did as speaker was make sure that we found a way to change the chancellor's regulations, which have force of law, to require that all Department of Education documents are translated into at least 8 languages in the Department of Education. Now, if that doesn't happen, parents have the right to sue and hold the Department of Education accountable, but it really opened up parents to have the information they need. 2, when we moved to the new network structure, which is another conversation we should have for another day, which I have concerns about, it was the council working with the Immigration Coalition that was really the only voice raising issues of English language learners in the network restructuring to try to make sure that the formula whatnot used in that continued to prioritize English language learners. I also think that if we commit to it, we can be the city that becomes known as the literacy city of America. How do we do that? We make a commitment to make literacy part of every classroom we have, and to also do it in a way that is inclusive of English language learners. We see that at high schools across the city, where even in chemistry, you don't just learn about molecules, you write about molecules. That is a way that we can really help add literacy in as a new and deeper component for all of the students that are out there in our city. I also think that immigrant students are some of the ones that are most impacted by our over-testing in schools. Now, a lot of the tests we have, we can't stop because they're state and federal requirements. But you know what we can stop? The field testing. We pay Pearson millions of dollars to do testing. But yet they test their test questions for the next year on our students. It totals, on average, 2 extra days of testing a year. And in 27 schools, we do even more than that. We stop that, it's going to give us more time in the classroom and more time to have various creative programs that would help English language learners. The other thing I would hope an immigrant family would feel excited about, if I'm mayor, is I want to move to a longer school day. We've seen schools do that across the city already without significant cost by changing their scheduling and doing really creative scheduling. More time in the classroom will help all students, but particularly immigrant students. Thank you. Thank you.